All right, everything seems to be working now. A bit late, a minute late, but we should be all right. I can see people are coming through. 10 people, 11. Very well, let me. Hi, everyone. Excellent. All right, 13, 14 people. People are coming through. That's excellent. Very well. Right. Apologies for the slight delay. Hello, everyone. Solo, hello. Reginald. Hello, Reginald. Lovely name, by the way. I think Reginald is very. I love the name. Excellent. Nice to see you all. This is the LinkedIn Live where I got the highest number of, let's say, of people who registered. I think we passed the 150 people who registered for this webinar. If we think about it, you're talking about bins management in a warehouse location for Business Central, which is such a niche topic if you think about it. And I published this stream. Um, when was it? Last week, and I got 150 people who showed interest in it, which is wonderful. Mohammed, hello Mohammed. Good evening, Alfredo. Hello, Gabriela. Excellent. I'm very excited because again, 120 people, 150 people registered, 22, 23 people are coming through. This webinar will stay in this page. I'm also recording, and by the way, I'm recording my own streaming, so I'm not recording the LinkedIn live, which means that your name, your message, that will not be recorded. I'm not recording that, right? So I'm only recording from my essentially my broadcasting software. Eventually, I will put together the collection of all the video content, LinkedIn Live, and other training sessions that I they published on LinkedIn, and I will put that together into, I will package it into a video series that I will then share on my website, d365training.com. Hello, good evening, everybody. Excellent, 26 people, and it's 4 minutes past 6, so let's get started. Use bins in a warehouse location. We're going to talk about warehouse management today. We're going to look and talk about physical inventory movements, item ledger entries. So, it will be quite hands-on because I will also eventually show you a demo live in my sandbox. So a bit about myself. If you're registered for this webinar, you should know me already. But anyway, just in case, my name is Alfredo. My surname is pronounced Iorio, by the way, but if you mispronounce it, it's perfectly okay. I am a senior Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central functional consultant, certified, and a Microsoft certified trainer. I'm also certified in Microsoft 365 CRM fundamentals, Azure fundamentals, Power Apps, and ERP. All certifications that I didn't manage to show on this slide because PowerPoint is really not my forte, as you might have noticed. So today we're going to look at, we're going to learn, no, we're going to look at, we're going to learn about Business Central bins and what these objects in Business Central do and how we can make the most of it in your organization or for your clients if you want a consultant. So today we will look at bins, warehouse entries, and item ledger entries, and how these areas affect each other and how they work together. We will learn about using default bins for receipts, shipments, and production, including some myth busting about how to use default bins. We will go through the configuration of fixed and default bins, which in my experience are a bit confusing. And so whenever I work on a new project, the difference between fixed bin and default bins is not always that obvious. And lastly, we will learn how to create and manage rules that we can apply to bins to replenish items in a warehouse with a live example, actually with a few live examples. So let's get through this PowerPoint quickly so that we can work in my sandbox. So let's get started. What are bins in Business Central? Bins divide locations, and the easiest way to explain it, and again, if you are familiar with Business Central, you should know by now what these bins are. So a subdivision of the location. In this illustration here of my PowerPoint, you can see like a storage room. There are pallets. There are storage on wheels. Essentially, all of these can be bins, essentially. And you can see in this example that you can have bins as in racking units. You can have bins as your essentially shelves, right? Individual shelves here. An entire, how do you call it, roll cage, right? Can be a bin. And that's because you might want to move items from their storage locations um, into a trolley that you can use for picking, or receiving items. You can put away items here in preparation for maybe a quality check, but also you can use a bin as an area of your warehouse where you want to park goods temporarily, or as we like to call it in warehouse management, as marshalling lanes. A marshalling lane is the area of the warehouse where goods are placed after picking in preparation for the goods to be collected, maybe from a courier and then be shipped. So you can use bins to further divide your locations. Bins are not on item ledger entries, and this is the first common misconception here. Here we're looking at a screenshot of an item ledger entries page in Business Central, which is essentially your inventory ledger, physical inventory movement. So you can see the list here: consumption, purchase, negative adjustment, sales. For an item or more items, you can find the location here. You can find the document number, document type, but bin is not here. That it's not because I have some unusual setup in my sandbox. Bins do not affect item ledger entries. Item ledger entries are only from location to another, which means you can start understanding how you can leverage bins if you want to subdivide a location and then be able to move items from one place to the other without affecting inventory. And this is really the main topic here, because every time you move, you create an item ledger entry. Depending on your costing method, your items may be re-averaged in terms of costing. The inventory aging will be affected. So moving items between bins does not affect inventory aging, does not update the average cost, or does not post to the balance sheet, as opposed to what happens when you transfer an item from one location to another. So when you're working on a new project, really the decision about whether you use one location, multiple locations, multiple bins is also driven by requirement of the finance team, right? Because the way you set up your locations and your bins in Business Central will eventually affect the company's balance sheet, right? So if you want a quick and easy way to move items internally without having planning, purchasing, reservations affected, right? Without having inventory costing, aging affected, bins are really the best tool to do that. So, the next topic here is default bins for receipt, shipments, and production. This is something that most consultants and users also don't find it immediately easy to understand. But default bins in Business Central are not supposed to be mandatory virtual bins. And this is something that I encounter all the time when I work on a new project. I need a virtual bin for inventory transactions, for staging bins, right? the default bins are really, and there should be, and there could be really more than one default bins for each kind of transaction. So the idea is that you should try and create bins to mirror what happens in your client's warehouse. And the idea that you must create a virtual receipt bin or a virtual shipment bin. It's also counterproductive because it really affects the confidence, your client's confidence about the system. Because the last thing that a warehouse manager or a warehouse team leader wants to see when they enable a new system or when they learn a new system, it's all those fake virtual places in a warehouse that do not represent anything that happens in the workplace. It's not a real shelf. It's not a real area of the warehouse. It's just something fake that the system needs to operate. This is not true, and I will show you later how you can avoid having these default bins. Which there is only one exception: it's the adjustment bin when we work with full WMS. That's the only real virtual bin. So movement restriction also happens on when we use default bins when using full WMS. So those bins are really supposed to be shipments, productions, and receipts, real areas of the warehouse where operations happen. We will see a couple of example receipts, and even production, right, in a few moments. So fixed bins and default bins. Again, very confusing. I will see. We will learn how to use it in a moment when we go into the demo. But really, these are the three main concepts that we really want to understand so that we can work on new projects for a client. So there is one default bin in simple WMS and with the setup, and it's really one default bin. So that's where the item is supposed to be and where the item is supposed to be placed. When we enable full or advanced warehouse directed put away and picks, Business Central will start working on fixed bins, and there might be multiple fixed bins for a particular location, for a particular item. Everything which is not a default bin or a fixed bin is called a floating bin. And although the name suggests that a floating bin is something that moves around, and so something that resembles a kind of virtual entity, a floating bin is far from a virtual bin. A floating bin in Business Central is a bin where no item is supposed to be there by default. So that will really help you when you design the rules about where to put away the item, because Business Central can work with put away templates that can include rules about when I receive an item, trying to find the fixed bins first, work out capacity and minimum and maximum quantities. But then if you don't find it, find a floating bin, which is a bin where anything can be stored, right? So really, default one, fixed many. And that's really will help you understand. When you work with a new client, this is the question: do you have a one-to-one policy for your items? And so customers will say, well, yes, that area of that rack, that shelving unit, it's only for that kind of product, for a prototype. We only store that. And so you might want to use simple WMS and default, again, the default bins. Again, everything will be more clear once we get into the live demo. So bins are not just divisions of locations where you can have essentially default bins and rules apply to it. When we enable the full capabilities of Business Central's warehouse management system, bins and their capabilities really are taken to the next level. And they work as small warehouses in a way. So you can start using bin types, which means there are certain movements that are allowed and movements that are not allowed on certain bins. When you work with bin types, you also have the option to set capacity. Capacity can be in weight, in volume, so that's really helpful when you have a large warehouse, like the warehouse we are seeing here in this example. I believe this must be an IKEA warehouse when you have furnitures and palletized goods and itemized goods here. And the layout sorry, the layout will help me also with an example. Also, we will look at that in a moment. So weight, how much weight I can put on a single rack and shelf unit, also for health and safety in a warehouse. Volume, how much stuff can I fit into this bin, and but also quantity. Fixed bins can have a set quantity or maximum items or certain items that I can put into it. Again, everything that will help me work out with the ranking and minimum and maximum quantity, so that I can use Business Central to automatically calculate replenishment rules. So the Business Central will tell me what to move, when, and where. And so, really, when you work with that logic, when you understand the full capabilities of bins in Business Central, then you will learn that the best practice for bin types is really your picking area should be pretty much here. And this warehouse is a very good example, because we can literally tell that the level 0 and 1 are all for boxes, individual boxes. So these items here are meant to be picked for orders, for customers' orders, put in a trolley, right, and then shipped. But also we have level 2 and 3, which you can see we have half pallets, you can see. So we can pick palletized goods and ship the pallet as it is. Maybe it's a wholesale order. And so this can be also a place where we put away. When you receive a new pallet, we can actually put it away straight here. But then lastly, we have the top levels, let's say, of my racking unit, that are only managed, only set up to be put away. So stock rotation, right? The items are received, we start filling up the shelves here, and as we create these rules using this essentially best practice, being with a type of picking or pick bins, must have a ranking which is higher than the put away bins. When these bins have a higher ranking compared to these, this happens. The replenishment can happen in this way, using this kind of circularity, if you think about it. So goods are received, they are received here, they put away here, then we replenish by filling up the bins there are on the lower shelves, and then lastly we ensure that the pick bins, or as some people like to refer to as pick phase, like the place where you can actually start picking your items, if you wish, if you like. So we, with a higher ranking here, the lower ranking here, Business Central will naturally, using the movement worksheet, suggest me to replenish the items. So a lot to take in terms of a presentation, and it's all very nice if you look at a screen, looking at a PowerPoint, but we all learn a lot more when we actually use the system, right? So let's go and let's look at my sandbox, and so we can run and have a few examples, right? So let me change my let's say the screen here, and so there we go. Let me refresh my sandbox, and now we're looking at my sandbox, which I just created for this demo. It's a UK sandbox, so it's based on a Great Britain localization, but the concepts and features and pages that I will show you today apply to any localization, right? So if you're working on a US localization or any other localization and supported by Business Central, the things that I will show you today here now essentially are the same. So there's no change. Right. So let's look at the first topic: item ledger entries uh, bins and warehouse ledger entries. So here are the few locations that I created for this demo. So I want to show you my location 00, which is a location with no warehouse activity enabled, right? So we don't use any warehouse document at all. We only have bin mandatory. We also have the default bin selection, which can be a fixed bin or a last used bin. I will come back to that section because it's quite misleading, and this is um, uh, the the naming convention, essentially the terminology is very confusing. But anyway, if we look at this one, let me go back to that later. You can see that my location Cardiff 00 um, shows 6 bins, and including of course the bin ranking, right? And here, when I create a new purchase order for an item that I want to receive here, let me show you what happens. Business Central will create the item ledger entry when I receive it, and I'm going to choose my items desk, and now I want to receive it in my location Cardiff. Notice how a bin is automatically applied here. So you don't need to use warehouse activities like receipt and put away or shipments and picks to work with default bins. The reason why my items desk show A02 is because if I look at my bin content, let me see how I can find it here. Actually, let's look at the item so I can show you in a better way. So if I open the item card, I will look at bin content, and now I filter on Cardiff. Well, you can see that I have a default bin A02 and a fixed bin A01. So location with no warehouse management features enabled, none. Bin mandatory and rules about fixed bin and default bin. Notice that there is no quantity here. So the reason why I was able to specify and set up a default bin for my items desk in a location with no WMS features enabled and no quantity is because I used the bin content creation worksheet. Very convoluted page with a batch per location. And here you can see my 00 Cardiff, and here essentially is what I can do here. I can choose a bin number, and I can choose a Paris desk, and I can make it a default. Again, not fixed because we're not using warehouse features here. Once the item is set up as on a default bin on the bin content creation worksheet, notice the word, it's a worksheet, so still a work in progress. Nothing happens. When I click on create bin content, I don't really create a content because there's nothing here. I essentially create the rule. And so now if I go back to the bin content here for my location Cardiff and I clear the filter, I can see a default bin for my Paris guest chair. And I don't need to essentially to receive stuff here. So default bin assigned to my item for a location with no warehouse management features. There we go, the default bin. So you don't need any kind of complexity to create rules about bins in Business Central, for which your client will really be grateful for. If they don't need WMS but they want rules for bins, Business Central will support it. Right, so I'm receiving 10 items and I'm going to post the receipt, right? Because I don't need to do anything else here. No warehouse receipts, right? No, nothing. So if I look at my receipts now, I can see the posted purchase receipt, and if I find my entries, something rather interesting happen. The item ledger entry and a warehouse entry. And so this is where people get confused, because why do I have an entry in my warehouse ledger? I didn't use any warehouse document, right? Well, Business Central will create a warehouse entry because the bin code is here. And the warehouse entry showing the bin code and the item show a positive adjustment related to the purchase order. And there is nothing else on this ledger that links the positive adjustment and the 10 pieces of this item in my bin to the item ledger entry, which is the physical ledger that will eventually result in my entries posted in my balance sheet once I post an invoice. So at the moment, everything is at zero because in my sandbox I don't have cost posted enabled. But again, for this demo purposes, it's not relevant. So the bin is not here. The bin code is here. That allows me to look at the item and then check on my bin content for my location Cardiff. Now my 10 units show here. Okay, the default bin. So same applies to sales. If I create a sales order now, I will get the default bin from where I can ship it. I can ship. So very simple way to manage bins and bin rules, including default bins for items on a location where no WMS is enabled. Very good for small companies that are just getting started. Again, lesson learned, don't add complexity to your client's operations if it's not required, right? So let's look at the next level now, because with simple warehouse management, now we have two options. We can use default bins and we can use putaways or ranking. And that comes from a recent update that Business Central released, I believe, last year, but I might be wrong. But again, it's not too old. So if we look back at locations, and I created two locations Newcastle. The one which is set up with default, and the second is set up with put-away templates and bin ranking. Let's look at the difference. So we require put-away and require pick, which means we use the one-to-one warehouse tasks. One order, one receipt, one sales order, one pick. Bin mandatory. The default bin selection looks at fixed bin. Again, the fixed bin here has got nothing to do with whether a bin is default or fixed bin on the bin content. Yeah, I understand it's a bit misleading, but again, we just need to work with the terminology that we have. So the default bin selection looks at the fixed bin, and now if I scroll back here, down, sorry, then I can see that I have two options. What kind of bin put away policies I want for my bins? And here you can see that it makes perfect sense. I can choose the default bin or I can choose the put away template. On the picking side, outbound, shipping out goods essentially, I can choose the default bin or I can choose the bin ranking. So here we will start looking at bin ranking, and you can ignore this room desk because we will use that for a production order. A bit of manufacturing today also, not too much, but it's worth noticing. So the bin ranking means the higher ranking will be chosen first, will be preferred, right, to the default bin, given that the item is available on more than one bin. And the put away policy, default or put away, it's on the new one, the other Newcastle, when I have bin ranking and the put away template. Now, put away templates now allow me to define rules, and this time we find the fixed bins, which can be more than one, right? So the put away template essentially is a set of rules arranged in a logical order, which means the first row will be the first rule to be applied, and if Business Central doesn't find a suitable bin using the rules in row number 1, it will skip to rule number 2, 3 until it finds a place to um, um, essentially put away the item. And you can see this is a standard, but you can have also more than one bin put away templates. Here I have fixed bins only, or standard templates. So likewise, I can choose to ignore the default bin and have bin ranking enabled. Now, let's see how it works. We will start with Newcastle with default bins. Another purchase order. Let's create a new one. We use Fabricam as usual. We choose our items at the desk, and now Newcastle default. Right, Newcastle default shows bin number 02. Bin number 02, it's the default bin. You can see it here, it shows yes, right? And so, because this location is set up with default bin, my bin is chosen here and it's the default. Now, I'm going to receive, let's say, 15 of these items, right? And I'm going to release it, and now I'm going to create the warehouse document that I need to create because I have warehouse management enabled here, warehouse features enabled. So in this case, it's a one-to-one, so I need to choose an inventory put away. I need to select the inventory put away option. The other options are something we will cover in a minute. Put away activity created, and now if I look at the entries here, I can choose inventory put away pick lines. There we go. All my items, all my 15 items are gone here in the bin code number 2, which makes perfect sense, right? It's the default bin. Now, one thing that I didn't show you is that the bin content list for this item here, you can see show a fixed bin A01, which is ignored. Again, default and not fixed. But I also want to show you something else. If I open the item and I look at bin content for Newcastle default, right? I need to use personalization to show you the minimum and maximum quantities, because something quite interesting happens. I have a maximum quantity of 10 on the default bin, right? Using the default method does not take account, essentially does not look at the capacity in terms of numbers, right, or quantities. So even though I have 10 maximum quantity, the 15 will be posted here. And so there is a limitation, but again, I want to receive it only. Oops, I always forget quantity to handle. Again, partial invoicing, a partial receive is always possible, and over receipt is always possible. But again, we're not going to look at over or under, something for another demo. Inventory put away is being posted. My receipt has been generated. If I find my entries, I see pretty much the same thing that I've seen before, right? The value, the warehouse entry that shows the bin number. Right, so now we have an issue where, not really an issue, we have the option now to choose another method, right? How about we reopen this order and we see the difference between Newcastle default and Newcastle location, where I have put away templates and ranking. Now, in this location, I want to receive 15, but I don't want to choose the default bin. I want to use the fixed bin. Note that the bin code is still associated here. It's still here. That's because on the purchase line, the same logic applies. But if I create an inventory put away, if my setup went well, I'm going to look at inventory put away lines, and now you will see the difference, right? Business Central has ignored the default bin on the purchase line and used the put away template that now supports maximum quantity. And therefore, my 15 items, my 15 disks, I'm not going all into A02. In fact, the A02 default bin is ignored, right? Not only that, but the maximum quantity of 10 is being taken, is being considered, and so Business Central has created 2 individual receipt. And it's also used the ranking because A01 has got a higher ranking than A03. So A01 first, which is the fixed bin with highest higher ranking, maximum quantity 10. It put 10 here, and then he moved 5 to the next fixed bin with enough capacity. It skipped 802 because it's 802 is default and not fixed. Now, really, this should make a lot of sense to you, and you can see how with simple WMS, I'm not using the warehouse receipt and warehouse put away. I'm not using full WMS, right? I'm using something very simple that will work for a lot of companies. In my experience, 70-80% of small and medium enterprises using um, trading inventory will work perfectly fine with this setup. You can see we also have rules here. So we can autofill quantity to handle and receive it. Right, so the same logic applies to outbound, right? I'm not going to show you the pick side of the thing because it works in exactly the same way, okay? Default, the same bin, bin ranking, it will just split, right? The bin, the pick into multiple lines, and it will ignore the default. It will look at the priority. So it should make a little sense now. So the next exercise that I'm going to show you that I want to look at today is for a production order, because that is linked to the concept of default shipment and receipt bins. Right. So let's look at an example here. Actually, let's do a receipt and a shipments before the production, because manufacturing is a bit more complex, right? Right. So what do we have here? We have a location Birmingham that I set up with receive and shipments instead of put away and pick. What is the difference between this setup with the Birmingham and the other one and the other before Newcastle? Is that shipment and receive allow me to work and consolidate multiple orders inbound and outbound into one receipt, as opposed to working on a one-to-one order with inventory put away and picks. So if your client receives containers made of different POs, different purchase orders, because they group everything using a consolidation center, maybe group punch, maybe a freight forwarder, and they receive a container that contains multiple POs for from different vendors. And they also do the same. They consolidate multiple shipments for the same customers into one container. This is what you want to use. So when I enable receive and shipment, I also have this option here, receipt and shipments. And so most people believe, well, that's what we need to do, right? Well, the answer is no. And in fact, there are times where you don't really want that because it can be counterproductive. Now, location Birmingham now can also be set up with put away policies at default bin, as opposed to another Birmingham location where I have put away templates and bin ranking. So the same logic applies. However, the difference between Birmingham and Newcastle is that receipt bin and shipment bins are grayed out. I cannot use it. And those are the default bins that most people do. Like, you know what, I need a virtual receipt bin, right? Rec bin. I don't like it. If you ask me, I really don't like this way of working. It might be necessary sometimes, okay? But really, most of the time you don't need it. And I'll show you why, because now we're going to run an exercise and we're using the default bin policy. So I'm going to create a new purchase order and we're going to receive it into Birmingham, right? Right. The same items, the same item stance, and I'm going to receive it into Birmingham default. Again, default bin is the same, A2. I set up the same bins with the same names and the same priority in all locations. So we are testing like for like, right? Everything is the same. So I'm receiving this one with this items desk here, okay? I'm going to release it and I'm going to do something else. I'm going to create another order for another vendor, and I'm going to use the same item just because again it's easy to compare like for like, even though in a real business scenario you will probably have different items, right? But again, it will help us understand the setup and the configuration. Everything is released, and so now that I'm working on consolidation, what I can do here, I can create a warehouse receipt, and I can start from a blank receipt. I want to receive it, my orders in my Birmingham default, and notice that I don't use a default receipt bin in my location Birmingham, right? And I'll show you in a moment what happens when we touch these fields here, but we don't need it. So I'm going to prepare, get source documents, and there we go. I found the two POs that I want to receive in Birmingham. I select both, I click OK. Business Central will create the receipt, the consolidated receipt, and the default bins will be the receipt bins. So there's no real need to have a virtual receipt bin in which you want to receive the items if you're working with receipts, and then create another document, the put away, to put away the items in storage. You can use default bins or putaways so that the team can receive items and directly into their storage location, right? And because we don't have advanced WMS here, the same bin code will be the bin code from where I can prepare a shipment, and I can just pick the goods from here and ship it, right? So I'm going to post the receipt, and there we go. So now my two orders have been completely received, right? So the receipt bin then for here is not necessary. We will see in a production order is also not necessary. But it might help me if I want to override that default bin, because I want that bin to be the receipt bin as a staging, right? And so in this case, really, the default receipt bin is a staging quality check bin before I can put that stuff away. That also doesn't have to be a fixed bin on the location, because now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another PO, and I will show you that let's create just one PO so that we go quickly here and we see how it works. So I'm choosing the default one, and again I'm choosing, I don't know, 20. Right, same logic applies, right? The capacity on a default bin can be exceeded. If I use a put away, I will have the split, right? But again, we covered that a few minutes ago, so there's no need to do that. So when I release this document, really, and I go and create a warehouse receipt, now the warehouse receipt here should be, if I think about the real business scenario, really, where I am a warehouse manager and I'm about to receive a container, I can choose the receipt bin from here, right? And this could be a staging area, and this could be a quality control area for the receipt area, right? And only after I've checked my receipts, then I want to use an internal movement to move it from one place to another. But I don't have to use a virtual bin. This can be a loading bay, right? An actual loading bay with the truck can actually, dock, so I can start working. So if I have a bin code here, which is the default receipt bin that you want to use on the location, when I choose the PO, then the default bin for my items desk will be ignored, and the bin that I use here will be stamped on all the receipt line. Doesn't mean that this is the default bin. No, the default bin is still 802. So when I can receive this item now, and then I can create an inventory turn a movement essentially, or a warehouse recast journal to move that item from B03, which is now being copied here. You can see because it's being copied from the receipt here, right? So there's no real need for fake default bins here. So let me show you another quick example now. And so we used last 15 minutes to look at the default bins for production, because you might say, well, Freddie, it's all nice when we work on shipments and pegs, but then manufacturing, it's a whole new different beast, right? I need a lot of complex bins here and lots of defaults. Trust me, no, you don't need that. Right, let me show you how it works. So let me go back to purchase orders and let me show you that I can work on a locations, and I'm going to use the location that I used before, which is Newcastle default. On Newcastle default, I created a dedicated room as my bin, and I have set up this location with production consumption, inventory movement or picks, production output with inventory put away. So I'm going to use warehouse tasks for this location, even though I'm not using essentially any default bin, because if I scroll down, my default bins are empty, right? No, there's nothing here. And I will show you that it works perfectly fine. In fact, it works how it is meant to be, in my opinion. So let's look at firm planned production order. And I'm going to create a new firm planned production order for an item that I set up, Turing Desk. Okay. Before I refresh the production order and I get the components in it, I want to tell the system that I'm going to that the output of this production order is in my location, Newcastle. The default bin assigned to the item, my table, it's now being applied automatically as the output. So the production output will be here. No need for virtual bins for which I need to move it, right? So I'm going to refresh the production order. Oops, I forgot to tell Business Central how many tables I want to create. Right, let's refresh. And now you can see my item here. If I look at my components, I see that I need to consume 10 mahogany planks, and I have a bin code which is B03, which is the default bin for the component. So the component will be picked essentially from its default bin and consumed, and the output will be generated for the default bin on the item. No need for virtual stuff. So I'm going to change the status. I want to update the cost and look at released order. Let's look at the released production order. The released production order, you can see here, shows pretty much what I have in mind now. So now I also have the production journals here, for which I need to, of course, to consume. But because the 20 mahogany planks, because 10 for each table, 2 tables. However, this location is set up would require pick. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create an inventory pick, not an inventory put away. And when I created the inventory pick, if I look at the put away pick lines, I show the source document, and there we go. My plank, my 20 planks, are being picked from their default bin for a production consumption. So I can part consume if I want to, but I'm going to do it in one go. What happens when I post it? Do you want to post the pick and production consumption? The production journal will also be posted, and it's not because I have flushing methods. Flushing methods can also be applied to it. I'm doing something very simple. Someone is picking those 20 planks from their location, from their bins, and they're being consumed. If I now look at the item ledger entries, I see the consumption. And so I don't need a journal here. I don't need a production journal. The production journal now will show what I need to do here. Let's say I have 20 minutes and 2 tables. Okay? So I'm going to post the journal lines. Excellent. What I have now, I have the output, right? Where is my output gone? My output, it's here. And if I look at the entries, guess what? Warehouse entries. I have a negative adjustment of the planks from B3 and a positive adjustment output on B02. No need for complex stuff. This is essentially done. It's finished and I don't need to use anything virtual, right? Default bins, again, if I had put away some bin ranking, the bins will be chosen for me. So 9 minutes to show you something a bit more sophisticated, because you might say, or your customer might say as well, you know what, we have machine centers, we have work centers in production, we need a virtual bin because I want to pick the item from their shelves and I want to place it in the virtual bin as my team works. Right, don't use virtual bins. I will show you what happens here when I look at work centers. Now, work centers, you can see that I created an assembly room, work centers, and look what we have what we have here. Oops, my mouse is playing. So my work center assembly room, it's in my location Newcastle, but I also have a 2 production bin code, which again doesn't have to be virtual. This shows as room W, desks and tables assembly. So it's a real area of my warehouse where desks and tables must be assembled. I don't need to have the from production bay, because once the output is assembly room, it's the finished product that I want to put away. Okay, so if I now go back to my firm planned production orders and I create a new one for my tourist desk, I am going to choose 2 and I choose the location, which I can default anyway to Newcastle. The bin code is chosen, fine. I'm going to refresh it, and now I'm able to release it. Okay, right, now released production orders with a with a work center that has got a bin in it, can really work in a very nice way. So my release production order, if I look at my components, I can see that my components, because it's still pointing at my location B3, right? Because it's the default bin, it's still using the routing of my work center assembly department, right? What if I change it to, and I did it on purpose, ideally you want the routing assigned to the assembly room, but I wanted to show you how it works. The moment I choose the new work center with a bin assigned to it, Business Central immediately identifies that the bin on the consumption does not match. And so with the bin on the work center, and says this change may have caused bin codes of some production of the component lines to be different. Well, it actually has. From those on the production order routing line, do you want to automatically align it all of those unmatched bin codes? Which is really, it's such a time saver if you think about it. So I say yes, please. I don't see anything about the bin here, because if I look at my components now Business Central knows that it needs to consume the mahogany planks from the assembly room, right? Bin content list for my item. And so now that my item is not in that assembly room, what do I need to do? I don't need a pick, because I cannot consume from the default bin, right? I need an inventory movement. And when I select inventory movement, I click OK. Number of inventory movement created, related planning line movement lines. I see an inventory movement with a typical take and place. And so the inventory movement with a source number and a source document, which is only supported in production, I believe. I might be I might be wrong, but I believe it's the only case where an inventory movement can have a source document. We taken the mahogany planks from their default bin and we move them all into the assembly room for desks and tables. No need to make up virtual stuff. Real things that team can understand. If I work in this shop floor, I read my document, I want to understand exactly what I need to do. No virtual prod in, prod out. Your system doesn't need that, and your client doesn't need that either, right? I fill the quantity in, I register the movement. My movement is registered. Now, my components are updated because I can actually pick and consume now from the assembly room. So up to me. Now I can just post the consumption, or I can post the output. In my case, because we're running out of time, I'm going to have the consumption done. I'm going to post both journals because now the inventory movement didn't post consumption, right? It's just an inventory movement. So now this one has been updated. If I look at my entries, item ledger entries, I have production and consumptions. How about the warehouse entries? I see the movement between the shelf from where we picked the wood, then they'll be moved here, and then the consumption journal that consumed these components, and then the positive, the output on B01 created by the production journal. I don't really need to move that item because I'm not using a virtual bin. I could have used another movement from the assembly room to the actual storage location, but again, for this demo, we didn't really need it. So, did I use a virtual bin? No. Did I use anything too sophisticated? No. A very simple warehouse. Does it work? It will work for the vast majority of small companies out there. Because again, we don't need that complexity. Finished, done. Excellent. So, you can see how, in this case, we managed to go through rather complex scenarios where we used bins to move items across, right, warehouse locations. And of course, there is all a new set of rules that you can use on, let's say, on bin content when we work on items on locations where you can see I have full WMS. I can choose bin ranking and putaways and pegs, and I can have complex scenario here where I can have the system essentially to automatically suggest from where to put away things, how to replenish items, where to pick from, and so on. Something that will require another probably demo because that it really puts the complexity to the next level. But if you want, if you'd like, you can let me know in the comments below. I can schedule another workshop in a few weeks' time, where we look at all you can do in a location with directed put away impacts, so we can really use all the capabilities that Business Central makes available for organizations that require more complexity, which again, it's a lot to take, but really it can take WMS to reach the next level. Right, so it's 1 hour, and I'm really grateful for really, it's 32 people online for 1 hour talking about warehouse management, which is really great. Feel free, please, to let me know. Let me have your comments. Let me, write your questions here on this screen. Sorry, on the screen. Let me know your questions in the comments, because the comments will stay here, and I just didn't have time to look at your comments and your questions, but I will promise you I will look at that later, and then I will reply to you for any question. If you have something more complex, like a business case, use case, and you're working on a new project, you're not that sure really about what to do, just send me a direct message, and I'll try my best to reply to you as soon as possible. Thanks a lot for your time. I really enjoyed having so many of you on this training session, and I hope you have a great rest of the evening if you are in my same time zone. And I'll see you all on my profile or my company page. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.